The weird part about divorce for a lot of men isn't being alone. It's realizing nobody checks on you emotionally, unless you ask them to. Because during marriage, even if things weren't perfect, there was still somebody there. Somebody who knew your schedule. Somebody who noticed when you were quiet. Somebody you automatically sent things to during the day without even thinking about it. And when that disappears, life gets strangely silent. Not dramatic, just quieter than you expected. You still reach for your phone sometimes when something funny happens. Still almost mention something to somebody in the passenger seat. Still walk into the house, expecting another presence there for a second before remembering. A lot of men aren't prepared for how much those little moments affect them, because routine companionship regulates people emotionally more than they realize while they still have it. Some men respond by emotionally shutting down completely afterward. Others slowly start rebuilding connection in smaller, healthier ways instead of pretending they don't need anybody anymore. Because most men already don't have many emotionally close relationships outside their partner. So after divorce, they don't just lose a relationship. Sometimes they lose their main source of emotional connection entirely. And that realization hits harder than they expect. Some men isolate themselves even more afterward. Others slowly start reconnecting with friendships, routines, family, and parts of life they neglected, while emotionally depending on one person for everything. And a lot of men eventually realize they were more emotionally exhausted than weak. Then eventually people start telling you to date again. And that's where things get weird. Because part of you wants connection, but another part feels exhausted by the idea of starting over emotionally with somebody new. Explaining your life again. Explaining the divorce again. Trying to figure out how vulnerable you're supposed to be now. Some men respond by shutting down emotionally, keeping conversations surface level, making jokes instead of saying how they actually feel, convincing themselves they're better off alone because depending on somebody again feels risky. Other men go the opposite direction. They get attached too quickly to anyone who makes them feel understood. Overshare early, mistake emotional relief for deep compatibility because they've been emotionally isolated for so long. Both reactions usually come from the same place: fear of going through another loss like that again. And eventually some men slowly learn how to let connection build without emotionally rushing to escape loneliness immediately. And divorce changes the way men react to uncertainty too. You tell yourself you don't care if she texts back. Then notice you check your phone 6 times in an hour anyway. You try dating apps for 20 minutes, then suddenly feel tired of the whole thing. You replay small interactions in your head longer than you admit to anybody. Not because you're weak, because rejection hits differently once you've already watched an entire life fall apart before. Especially when you've already had to rebuild your life once before. Some men respond by chasing reassurance harder. More dates, more attention, more conversations that temporarily make them feel wanted again. And sometimes it's not even about the person. It's about feeling chosen, feeling important to somebody again. Other men start rebuilding stability outside of relationships entirely, spending more time with friends, getting serious about routines, focusing on parenting, building a life that still feels solid, even when nobody's emotionally validating them every day. Both are usually trying to solve the same fear. What if nobody ever cares about me like that again? And a lot of men never say that thought out loud, because they think they're supposed to move on quietly, stay composed, stay productive, act unaffected. So instead, the fear leaks out in smaller ways, becoming emotionally detached too early, pretending not to care when they actually do, acting overly independent because vulnerability started feeling dangerous. And part of them knows it's happening while it's happening. That's the uncomfortable part. Because sometimes what looks like being guarded is really just fear wearing confidence as a disguise. And a lot of men don't realize they're protecting old pain until they finally feel emotionally safe around somebody again. Some men stay emotionally armored for years afterward. Others slowly become more honest over time instead of performing emotional invulnerability constantly. They stop trying so hard to seem emotionally invulnerable. They admit when something hurts instead of immediately joking it away. They let people see more of who they actually are. Other men become slower and more observant instead. Not cold, just more intentional. Paying attention to consistency, to emotional safety, to whether somebody brings peace into their life instead of emotional confusion. That shift changes people quietly, especially men who spent years believing love was mostly about sacrifice and endurance. Because after divorce, a lot of men realize how much of their identity got built around being needed. Provider, problem solver, reliable one, strong one. And when the marriage ends, they quietly lose structure too. You see it in little things. Eating dinner in silence more often. keeping stress to themselves automatically, having bad days without telling anybody, because there's nobody they naturally open up to anymore. Some men become emotionally self-contained afterward, handling every problem internally, avoiding emotional dependence completely, wearing isolation like maturity. Even though a lot of men eventually realize isolation and peace are not the same thing. Other men start craving emotional closeness so badly that they ignore obvious incompatibilities just to avoid feeling alone again. Both reactions usually come from the same question: what happens to me if nobody needs me anymore? And that question sits deeper in a lot of men than people realize. Some men spend years trying to outrun loneliness. Others slowly start reconnecting with parts of themselves that existed outside being somebody's husband, because eventually dating stops being about finding somebody. It starts exposing the relationship a man has with himself when nobody's relying on him every day anymore. Who are you when nobody needs fixing? Who are you when nobody's waiting for you to come home? Who are you when your usefulness is no longer the main thing giving you identity? That's where a lot of men really meet themselves for the first time. Some men keep trying to fill that silence immediately. Others slowly start discovering who they are outside responsibility, emotional survival, and constantly being needed by everybody else. Because sometimes the hardest part after divorce isn't losing love. It's realizing how much of your identity got built around being useful to everybody else. Provider, problem solver, reliable one, strong one. And after a while, the real danger isn't rejection. It's slowly becoming emotionally numb just to avoid ever feeling abandoned again. Saying less, feeling less, needing less. Some men stay emotionally guarded for years afterward. Others slowly realize healing has nothing to do with becoming unreachable. It's learning how to let people close without losing yourself inside responsibility, fear, or emotional survival again. Because eventually, a lot of men realize protecting themselves from pain also protected them from closeness. And eventually, the real question stops being, how do I avoid getting hurt again? And becomes, who am I when I'm no longer performing strength for everybody else all the time?